I wasn't asking for a promotion. I wasn't gunning for a corner office with a view. All I asked for was a 5% raise. Just 5%. After 3 years of coming in early, staying late, working weekends, and missing every Thanksgiving and July 4th barbecue, 5% was the number that got me laughed at. I'll never forget that sound. My boss, Gregory, leaned back in his sleek leather chair like he was settling in to watch a sitcom. "Rachel," he said with a smug grin, "if you want more money, go get a job somewhere else." Then he chuckled, as if he'd delivered some kind of punchline. 5%, he muttered, shaking his head, still amused. I sat there, frozen, hands clenched tightly under the conference table. My presentation folder was open in front of me, charts neatly printed showing how client accounts under my management had grown revenue by over $1.2 million last year. I wore my best navy blazer, smiled calmly, practiced every word, but nothing could have prepared me for that kind of dismissiveness. "Thank you for your time," I said quietly, gathering my papers. My fingers were steady, but something in me cracked. It wasn't my confidence. It hadn't lived here for a while. No, this was deeper. Like the last fracture in a foundation that had been quietly eroding under pressure. "My name is Rachel Bennett. I'm 32 years old, a senior account coordinator at Halstead Group Marketing. At least I was. Up to that moment, I was the kind of employee bosses like to boast about. Never missed a deadline, took the most difficult clients and made them happy. Skipped vacations, arrived early, left late. I was the person they counted on when everyone else was tired or overwhelmed. And I only asked for a raise once. Just once. I walked back to my desk, not an office, just a corner cubicle by the copy machine, and stared at my screen. My coffee had gone cold. My inbox was already full. Another urgent project had been dumped on me that morning. "Rachel always gets it done," they'd say, like it was praise. But it felt more like a sentence. And if you're watching this, maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've stayed in a job, a relationship, or a life where your loyalty felt painfully one-sided. If that hits home, you're not alone. Click like, drop a comment, because what happened next might help someone else speak up too. That night, I stayed late. Again. Finishing a campaign presentation for a client Gregory had completely forgotten about. When I finally stepped into the cold night air, it was almost 9 p.m. The parking lot was nearly empty, just my car, the janitorial van, and Gregory's Lexus. I sat in my driver's seat, staring at the office windows I'd looked through for over 1,000 days, wondering why I kept trying to prove my worth, as if value had to be earned through burnout. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened LinkedIn. There it was, a red notification on my messages. I tapped it. "Rachel, if you're ever open to a conversation, we'd love to chat. Your work with Carrington Corp didn't go unnoticed." It was from Natalie Reeves, VP of Strategy at Whitmore Partners, our biggest competitor. The message had been sitting there for 2 months. I stared at it, heart pounding. Gregory's voice echoed in my mind. "If you want more money, get a job elsewhere." So I replied, "Hi, Natalie. Thank you for reaching out. If you're still interested, I'd be happy to have that conversation." Her response came 5 minutes later. "Let's talk tomorrow. I'll call you at noon." And just like that, my story started to change. I sat back in the driver's seat, adrenaline buzzing like I'd just broken some unwritten rule. But all I'd done was reply to a message, just tapped out a few polite words on a screen, and yet something had shifted. I wasn't out the door yet, but I'd stepped through something. A crack of light in a hallway I didn't realize I'd been trapped in. The next morning, I pulled into the Halstead Group parking lot at 8:15 a.m., coffee in hand and resolve buried just beneath the surface. I passed the reception desk, exchanged the usual half-hearted greetings, and headed straight to my corner cubicle. Same hum of the copy machine, same flickering fluorescent light overhead, same people walking past without ever really seeing me. At 10:03, Gregory strolled in, late as always, latte in one hand, ego in the other. He grinned. "Still here, Rachel? After all that drama?" He winked like the whole thing was some kind of inside joke. I smiled back, steady. "Of course, I've got a full day ahead." He had no idea I'd be on a life-changing phone call in less than 2 hours. I dove into the Carrington campaign report, my final deliverable before Friday. I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it because it had my name on it, my effort, my ideas, every graph, every paragraph, every outcome. It was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I needed his approval to own that. At exactly 11:59, I stood up and walked quietly to the break room. It was empty, save for a few stale bagels in a cardboard box and the hum of the old fridge that never quite closed all the way. I closed the door behind me, sat at the round table with my phone in hand, and took a breath. At 12 p.m. sharp, my phone lit up. "Rachel, this is Natalie." Her voice came through warm, confident, steady in a way that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. "Hi, Natalie. Thank you for calling. I've followed your work since the Carrington campaign," she said. "Your targeting logic, your execution strategy, it shifted our whole approach. It was surgical." I blinked. At the client meeting, Gregory had hogged the spotlight, took credit for everything. My name was never mentioned. I had built that campaign, ran the A/B testing, refined the conversions, even restructured the segmentation funnel myself. He had simply shown up to the presentation and nodded. "Thank you," I said carefully. Natalie didn't waste time. "We want you here," she said. "You're not just talented, you're underutilized, and I know what that feels like." That line hit harder than I expected. "What's the role?" I asked, heart thudding. "Senior campaign strategist," she replied. "You'd lead your own team. Salary's 35% higher than what you're earning now. Full creative control, profit sharing, no micromanagement. We trust the people we hire to do what they're great at." I inhaled slowly. It felt surreal, like someone was reading a job description built from everything I'd silently wished for, but never dared to expect. "That's generous," I said. "It's fair," she corrected gently. "Fair for what you bring to the table. HR's already cleared it. If you want the job, it's yours. But I'll need your answer in 24 hours. No interviews, no hoops to jump through. They already knew my worth, from the outside. I promised to call her the next day and hung up. I sat in silence, the fridge humming beside me. Down the hallway, Gregory was probably cracking jokes over steak or sushi about over-emotional employees. At 12:30, I returned to my desk. Another email from him was waiting. "Rachel, can you handle this? You're the only one I trust to clean up this mess." Of course. They always trusted me to clean, to fix, to carry weight no one else would touch. But never to lead, never to matter. That night, I called my mom. She used to work the late shift at a pharmacy, raising me on her own, couponing dinner, and making sure my clothes were clean even if hers weren't. "You're not actually thinking about staying, are you?" she asked, quiet but firm. I hesitated. "I've been at Halstead Group for years. It just feels wrong to leave." She exhaled. "Rachel," she said softly, "what's wrong is giving everything you have to a place that treats you like a spare part. You didn't leave. They just never saw you." And just like that, I finally understood. I didn't sleep that night. My body was still, but my mind kept racing, replaying every late night I stayed behind, every lunch I worked through, every time I'd swallowed my voice just to keep the peace. How many times had I shrunk myself to fit into a company that never made space for me? At 6 a.m., I got up, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and stared at the message I'd drafted hours earlier. Then, finally, I hit send. "Natalie, I'm in. Let me know the next steps." Her reply came within 5 minutes. "Welcome to the team. We'll send over your offer and onboarding packet by noon." I read it again. Welcome to the team. That phrase hadn't meant anything the last time I heard it. At Halstead Group, it had been tossed at me by a receptionist so buried in paperwork she didn't even look up. But now it meant freedom. At 9 a.m., I walked into the office like it was any other Tuesday, smiled at the receptionist, sat at my usual desk, responded to emails from people who didn't know I had one foot out the door. They'd never noticed when I stayed until 8 p.m. or when I took client calls from the emergency room waiting area while my mom was sick. Why would they notice now? But I was different. Something in me had settled. I felt grounded, not loud, not dramatic, just certain. At 10:30, the offer landed in my inbox. I opened the PDF and my eyes scanned the numbers. 35% raise, full benefits, profit sharing, paid sabbaticals after 2 years. My chest tightened. I printed it, folded it neatly, slipped it into my tote bag. Then, at 11 a.m., I walked to Gregory's office and asked, "Do you have a moment?" He gave me that cocky little smirk. "Round 2 already? You sure you want to do this?" "Not exactly," I said and handed him the letter. He opened it slowly, and for the first time since I'd known him, his expression dropped. The smirk dissolved. His brow tightened as he read the header. "Offer of employment, Whitmore Partners." "You're kidding," he finally muttered. "I'm not." "But they're our biggest competitor." I nodded. "And you told me if I wanted more money, I should go find another job. So I did." He sputtered. "You won't last there." "It's brutal. A pressure cooker." I kept my voice calm. "I've worked 60-hour weeks here for 3 years straight. I think I'll manage." He stood up fast, agitated now. "This is betrayal after everything I've done for you." I looked him square in the eye. "You mean everything you've done to me?" Then I smiled. Not a smug smile, a relieved one, the kind that comes when you finally stopped asking for permission to be seen. "Don't worry, Gregory. Tomorrow's my last day. I'll make sure the transition is seamless." The next morning, I arrived early, not to be theatrical, but to say goodbye to the quiet version of the office. The one before the clinking coffee cups, the shallow chatter, the tension in the air. I wanted to walk through it one more time without the noise. By the time Gregory walked in at 9:57 a.m., latte in hand as usual, I had already boxed up my belongings, my mug, the little cactus I kept on my desk, the framed photo of my niece from her 7th birthday. The one I missed because a client emergency couldn't wait. He didn't look at me, didn't say good morning, but his posture was stiff, his movements tight. He knew. At 10:30, I hit send on my final company-wide handover email. It was short, polite, all business, links to every project file, passwords, contact notes. I signed it simply, "Today is my last day. It's been a journey. Wishing you all the best moving forward. Rachel." 15 minutes later, the messages started coming in. From Julian in finance, "Wait, you're leaving? What happened?" From Brian in client success, "They're going to fall apart without you." From Haley in creative, "Tell me where you're going." "I want to follow you there." I didn't respond. Not yet, but I smiled. Because for the first time in years, they finally noticed I was gone. I glanced at Haley's message again. "Tell me where you're going." "I want to follow you there." But I didn't respond. Not yet. Not while I was still technically under Gregory's roof. At 11 a.m., I got a message from him. "Can you come by my office?" I knew what this was. He greeted me with a carefully rehearsed calm. "Rachel," he began, as if saying my name slowly could undo the damage. "I've been thinking about yesterday." I didn't say a word. "I may have reacted poorly. I shouldn't have laughed. That wasn't professional." It took effort not to let a smile slip. He wasn't apologizing. He was negotiating. "I spoke to HR," he added, "and we'd like to offer you a 7% raise." Retroactive to January, I raised an eyebrow. "Now? After 3 years?" "It's a good offer," he insisted. "It shows we value you." "You value me," I said quietly, "now that I've packed my parachute." His face tightened, just slightly. I folded my hands. "I appreciate the gesture, Gregory, but I've already accepted another offer." His frown deepened. "That doesn't have to be final. You haven't left yet. We can match what they're offering." I leaned forward, voice steady. "Can you match a culture that respects its people? A manager who gives credit where it's due? A workplace where results matter more than favorites?" He had no answer. Just silence. "I'm not leaving because of money," I said. "I'm leaving because I was invisible here. Until I became inconvenient." He exhaled sharply. "If you walk out now, you're burning bridges, Rachel." I stood. Number U lit that fire when you laughed at me for asking to be valued. And with that, I walked out of his office. No fanfare, no parting handshake. At noon, a text buzzed on my phone. It was Natalie. "Just confirming, you're still good to start Monday?" I replied instantly. "Absolutely. Let me know what I need to prep." Another message came just seconds later. "Actually, check your email." Thought you'd want to see this, I refreshed my inbox. There it was, an email chain forwarded from Sterling Biotech, one of our biggest accounts. At the top, a note from their VP. "We're disappointed to hear Rachel is leaving. She was the main reason we stayed with Halstead Group. Please confirm who will be handling our account. We're reconsidering our partnership." My heart raced. Attached below was the original email they had sent directly to Gregory. I forwarded it to my personal inbox and hit save. By 3 p.m., I was called into HR. They handed me the usual stack of papers, exit forms, tax documents, confidentiality agreements. Then came the surprise. "We'd like you to sign this," the rep said, sliding a final page toward me. I glanced down. A non-compete. I laughed for the first time all week. A real laugh. This wasn't in my original contract. "We're asking all employees to sign it going forward. It's just a formality." I slid it right back across the table. "I'm leaving, not dying, and I'm not signing away my right to work." They blinked, unsure how to respond. Maybe they expected the quiet girl in the copy room to stay quiet to the very end. At 4:15, I made one last walk to Gregory's office. I placed my company badge and phone on his desk. He didn't look at me, didn't say goodbye, but I could feel it, the unease radiating off him like summer heat on blacktop. At exactly 4:23 p.m., I walked out of Halstead Group for the final time. No farewell cake, no send-off lunch, no forced smiles around a conference table. Just silence and freedom. Because come Monday morning, I wouldn't be fielding panicked calls about missing files or confused clients. That would be Gregory's new normal. Me? I'd be walking into Whitmore Partners, with my name on the door, my reputation intact, and for the first time in a long time. My value not just seen, but celebrated. By the time I stepped into the glass-wrapped headquarters of Whitmore Partners that Monday at 8:30 a.m., everything felt different, lighter. Sunlight poured through towering windows, casting warmth across polished concrete floors and collaborative, open spaces buzzing with energy. The receptionist greeted me with a wide smile and handed me a welcome packet with my name printed on top in bold lettering. "Welcome to the team, Rachel," she said, handing me a fresh cup of coffee without even asking how I liked it. "You're going to love it here." And I already did. My new office wasn't extravagant. It wasn't on the top floor or filled with mahogany furniture, but it had a door, a real door, a window with morning light, a quiet space that belonged entirely to me. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like I was squeezing myself into a corner. I felt like I finally fit. Before I'd even opened my inbox, I saw the headline, "Sterling Biotech Terminates Contract with Halstead Group." I clicked it immediately. An internal memo had leaked, and Sterling's leadership stated plainly that the departure of key personnel had prompted the decision. My name wasn't in the press release, but it didn't need to be. Just as I finished reading, Natalie walked into my office holding up her phone. "I take it you've seen the news?" I nodded. "That was fast." She smirked. "When you're the glue, the cracks show quickly once you're gone." I smiled, but only halfway. "They're going to blame me," I said quietly. "They'll try," she replied. "But the truth? They let you go long before you walked out the door." That hit deeper than I expected. The rest of the morning was spent meeting my new team. 3 seasoned strategists, 1 wide-eyed intern named Jordan Clark, and a brilliant data scientist who reminded me of myself 5 years ago. Eager, methodical, overthinking every move. "You don't have to prove anything here," I told her during our first project review. "If you've got an idea, bring it." She blinked. "Even if it's different from yours?" I smiled. "Especially if it is." By 2 p.m., my inbox was overflowing. LinkedIn messages, Slack notifications, texts from former colleagues. From Haley. "Gregory's spiraling. Sterling pulled out. Now Bioplex is threatening to walk too." From Brian. "He just called an emergency meeting. You should have seen his face." I read the messages slowly, one by one. And it wasn't revenge I felt. It was clarity. This was never about punishment. This was about visibility. What happens when a company builds its success on people it refuses to truly see? At 3:15 p.m., Natalie stopped by again. "Leadership wants to meet. You're heading up the Sterling transition." I blinked. "Me?" She nodded. "They asked for continuity, confidence. They asked for you." My throat tightened. I'd be honored. And just like that, I became the face of a $4.2 million contract. By Tuesday, the dust hadn't even settled at Halstead Group. Clients were pulling back, campaigns paused, 2 firms invoked exit clauses. I watched from a distance, not with smugness, but with something closer to inevitability. Because this is what happens when leadership confuses silence with satisfaction. Later that day, I got a message from Sandra in finance. "HR just announced layoffs, starting with account support. Everyone's saying it's your fault." I stared at the screen for a long time, typed, deleted, typed again. Then finally replied, "I'm sorry they're going through that, but I didn't cause this. The people who refused to value their team did." And I meant it, because standing up for yourself has a cost. But so does staying silent, and I was finally learning the difference. "I'm sorry they're going through that," I typed back, "but I didn't cause this. The damage was done the moment leadership stopped valuing the people who kept the wheels turning." I sat back in my chair, my eyes drifting to the window. Outside, the late afternoon sun stretched across the city skyline, golden and indifferent. Inside me, a swirl of emotions churned, pride in my decision. Yes, but also a twinge of guilt. Not for leaving, but for those who didn't get out in time. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about Jordan Clark, young, bright, still unscarred, about Haley and Brian, about the lunches we used to share at that sticky break room table, swapping inside jokes and stress over stale tuna sandwiches while Gregory dined on steak and red wine at some high-rise restaurant. taking credit for work he barely understood. It made me wonder, what's the real price of standing up for yourself? Because it's not just your life that changes when you finally draw a line. There's collateral. There are people left behind. The next morning, Natalie knocked on my door with a cup of coffee in one hand and a thoughtful look on her face. "Got a minute?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me. "We're expecting more resumes from Halstead Group," she said. "A lot of people are looking for a place to land. I want you to help review them, especially for the Sterling account. You know who the real contributors were. You know who deserves another shot." Her words stirred something in me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about redemption. It was about restoration, about giving people the recognition they were once denied. "I'd be honored," I said. Natalie stood to leave, but then paused. "Oh, almost forgot. Gregory reached out." I blinked. "What?" "He submitted a request through our website's contact form, said he'd like to meet, wants to offer consulting, help us understand the client landscape better." I let out a dry, involuntary laugh. "And what did you say?" Natalie smiled. "I told him we already have all the insight we need." She didn't need to say my name. I already felt it. 3 weeks after I first walked into Whitmore Partners, I found myself standing at the head of a glass-walled conference room, laser pointer in hand, walking executives through a quarterly projection for Sterling Biotech. Every line on the chart was trending upward: ROI, customer satisfaction, brand reach. This wasn't luck. It was leadership built on trust, not fear. My team wasn't delivering because they were terrified of failure. They delivered because they felt seen, respected, and supported. For the first time in my career, I wasn't hiding behind a report. I was the report, the decision maker, the voice in the room that people actually listened to. And still, there was a weight to carry, because while I was rising, Halstead Group was falling apart. Layoffs had spread to middle management. Word got out that Bioplex and Marintech had pulled their contracts too. More than half the office had been let go. Those who remained were clinging to their desks like lifeboats. And somehow, my name still echoed in those halls. One afternoon, I opened my inbox and found a message from Haley. She had always been one of the brightest minds on the creative team. Thoughtful, resourceful, overlooked. "Rachel, they let my whole team go yesterday. I've never worked anywhere else. I don't know what to do. But I'm not mad. You did what the rest of us only dreamed of doing." That message hit me harder than I expected. I opened her portfolio and forwarded it to our design director. By the end of the week, Haley was in a second-round interview, but it didn't stop with her. Quietly, I began compiling names, people I remembered who stayed late, cleaned up messes, lifted others without ever getting credit. Sandra, Brian, Marcia from QA, Marcus from IT. I knew who carried the weight, and now I knew how to lift them. It became a side mission. Each evening after work, I'd scroll through LinkedIn, dig through old Slack threads, review client feedback. I wasn't chasing the past. I was building a better future, one name at a time. They were the ones who kept the wheels turning while Gregory played CEO in name only. And one by one, I found ways to bring them over. Those who still had the energy, the hope, the belief that things could be different. But not everyone was ready. Some ignored my messages altogether. Others replied with polite hesitations. "Thanks, Rachel, but I'm not ready to leave the past behind." And I respected that. Still, one response lingered longer than the rest. It came from Patrice, our former accounting lead, quiet, steady, and brilliant in ways most people never noticed. Her reply was short. "You got your promotion by watching the house burn after you left. Don't act like a hero now." That one cut deeper than I expected. I reread it twice, then filed it into a folder I'd started, unofficially, called The Cost, because that's what it was. The cost of being seen, the cost of refusing to stay small, the cost of choosing yourself when the system only rewards your silence. A week later, Natalie and I presented a formal proposal to the executive board, the Talent Recovery Initiative. It wasn't just a feel-good idea, it was a commitment to those who had been chewed up by a broken system. A way to prioritize displaced Halstead Group employees in our recruitment pipeline. We recommended structured onboarding, mentorship programs, referral bonuses, even transitional consulting roles for those nearing retirement or shifting careers. One board member leaned forward, skeptical. "Are you sure this is the right move? These folks were part of a failed company. Some may carry unproductive habits." Natalie didn't flinch. "They weren't the problem," she said. "They were the solution, just buried under bad leadership." It passed, unanimously. By the end of the month, 14 former Halstead Group employees had joined Whitmore Partners. Haley was promoted to lead designer in just 2 weeks. Marcus, our new IT systems lead, rebuilt our internal comms in record time. Brian engineered a new client feedback loop that cut our response time by nearly 30%. More than productivity, something else was shifting. Culture, stronger, quieter, but real. One morning, I walked into the lobby and immediately felt something off, a familiar tension. Then I saw him, Gregory. He looked like a man who'd stepped out of a different lifetime. Thinner, paler, with a worn leather briefcase and a forced smile stretched too tight across his face. "Rachel," he said, his voice cracking at the edges. "I'm not here to cause trouble." I stayed still. "What are you here for?" He took a step closer, eyes darting. "I heard you're hiring former Halstead Group people. I need work. I've got a family, a mortgage. You know how this industry works. Once your name's attached to failure..." He trailed off, waiting for mercy. I didn't move. "I'm not in charge of executive hiring." "I'll take anything," he blurted. "Consulting, training, admin work, anything." And there he stood, the man who once told me I was replaceable, now asking for a second chance. "You said I burned bridges," I reminded him softly. He looked down. "Turns out, I was the one holding the matches." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I told him I'd pass along his resume, and as I walked away, I realized something I hadn't fully understood until that moment. I didn't have to destroy him to win. He'd done that on his own. All I did was stop begging to be seen by a place that never looked. 6 months had passed since I walked out of that glass office and never looked back. Halstead Group had lost 4 major clients, laid off over 60% of its staff, quietly pulled out of 2 national campaigns. Rumors floated. Mergers, restructuring, even liquidation. I didn't watch with satisfaction. I didn't watch with sorrow either. I just observed, the way you'd watch a house collapse that you once tried to save. You warned them the foundation was cracked, and they refused to listen. Meanwhile, my world had changed entirely. I had a real office, with a view, a door, and a team that asked for my input, not my silence. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just working hard. I was working free. My ideas were no longer whispered behind closed doors. They were credited publicly. The workload was still demanding, but no longer thankless. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. Not because the pressure disappeared, but because the weight of invisibility had finally lifted from my shoulders. One morning, I arrived early. The building was still quiet. The hum of the HVAC system, the only sound. I loved those first moments of the day, before the buzz, before the meetings. It reminded me of all those mornings at Halstead Group when I was always the first one in and no one noticed. But now I noticed, and that made all the difference. I made myself a cup of coffee, settled in, and opened a campaign brief from one of our junior strategists, Jordan Clark. It was sharp, thoughtful, bold. Her voice was all over it, and it was clear she hadn't just followed instructions, she had led with her own instincts. I made a note in the file, no edits, just well done. Before I closed the document, something in her email footer caught my eye. Mentored by Rachel Bennett. I paused. That single line struck deeper than I expected. It was the kind of acknowledgement I used to dream of. Not applause, not awards, just recognition that I had helped someone else rise, the way no one ever helped me. At 11 a.m., Haley stopped by my office. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "They offered me the lead designer role," she said, like it was still sinking in. I smiled. "Of course they did." She hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready." "You've been ready for a while," I said gently. "You're just not used to being seen." Her smile wavered, bittersweet. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't left." I nodded. "So do I." "But you did," she added, "and it made space for the rest of us to believe we could too." That afternoon, I found myself reviewing another batch of resumes, former Halstead Group employees, hoping for a new start. I could have delegated it, but I didn't. I wanted to do it myself. I remembered their faces, their effort, the weight we all tried to carry for a system that was never designed to carry us. Not all of them made it out. Some had vanished entirely from LinkedIn. Others had pivoted to different careers: graphic design teachers, real estate agents, dog trainers. A few, like Patrice, still hadn't responded, but I kept a folder with their names, not out of obligation, but because I understood the cost of staying. At 4 p.m., a new message popped up in my inbox. The subject line stopped me cold. Gregory Stanton. Application. I stared at it for what felt like a full minute. He had applied for a consulting role. No note, no message, just a resume full of jargon and half-truths. I didn't open it. I simply clicked mark as read and closed the tab. There was nothing left to say. Gregory had already taught me the most valuable lesson of my career, not by guiding me, but by underestimating me. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply done. That evening, as I packed up my office, I glanced at the framed copy of my original offer letter from Halstead Group, the one I had kept all these years, taped to the inside of a drawer, as a reminder of how little they thought I was worth. Next to it, I placed a card from Jordan Clark. She had given it to me my first week as her mentor. "Thank you for making space for people like me. I hope I make you proud." She already had. I turned off the lights and stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. Gregory's laughter, his smirk, that line, "If you want more money, get a job elsewhere." He thought he was dismissing me. Instead, he launched me into a new life, a better one. One built not on title or permission, but on quiet courage, hard-earned wisdom, and the unshakable truth that your value isn't something given by others. It's something you claim for yourself. The real raise? It wasn't in my paycheck. It was in the respect I earned, the peace I found, and the future I built, on my own terms. And that, no one could ever take from me again. Standing up for yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival. There comes a point in every career or relationship when loyalty begins to look a lot like self-abandonment. Rachel's story isn't just about a raise. It's about waking up to the realization that being indispensable isn't the same as being respected. For 3 years, She gave everything to a company that only noticed her value when she was already walking out the door. That's a truth many middle-aged professionals know all too well. Her quiet courage, replying to a long-forgotten LinkedIn message, choosing respect over fear, and eventually mentoring others, reminds us that our worth isn't defined by titles or applause. It's defined by how we carry ourselves, even when no one's watching. If you've ever stayed somewhere out of guilt, fear, or obligation, ask yourself, is this a place that sees me or simply uses me? Because you don't owe loyalty to people or institutions that ignore your contributions. The real promotion isn't always a new title. It's the moment you choose peace over pleasing, growth over comfort. Rachel didn't just walk away. She walked toward something better. And in doing so, she made space for others to believe they could too. That's not betrayal. That's leadership.